I did this survey on Twitter of front-end developers and indie makers, and I came up with some pretty surprising results, and I thought other people might be interested in them. So the first question I asked is, what's the hardest part of building a product? And by a large margin, 59%, people said marketing slash market research. And that really resonates with me. I don't know why marketing is so hard for developers and for people who just like make stuff in general, but it seems to be the hardest thing by far. Coming in second was design UX, which makes a lot of sense out of Tailwind and Tailwind UI's massive success. I think they tapped into something in the general market, but also in the market of indie hackers, right? People who are releasing these independent software products and don't really want to focus too much on design, but want it to look really, really nice. The next few were security, and then I believe there was my JavaScript framework in there, tied with backend development. So that was really interesting to me. I do think that there's a huge need in this market for someone to come up with a step-by-step guide that's really clear about how to do marketing. And I think by marketing, indie hackers just mean I don't want to call people, I don't want to cold call people or cold email people. So I need a different way to get people to come to my site and use it and pay for it. And how do I do that? I'm definitely in that market. I don't want to call anyone up anonymously and bother them, and I don't want to spam them, but I do want people to come to my site. So is SEO the answer? Is posting on random forums the answer and getting banned from Reddit half the time the answer? Is it just Twitter? Do I just tweet and tweet and tweet and try to build up an audience and then release products? What exactly is the right way to do this? And I think there's just a lot of confusion around that and a lot of like severe frustration because every product's different and everyone's different, right? So it feels like there's not one answer, but then everyone on Twitter keeps saying, well, just do just do marketing. Stop focusing on building, just do marketing. And it's kind of a frustrating situation. Okay, so on to the next one. Do you build products on your own time? Pretty much everyone said yes. Do you build in public? This was another interesting one to me because 36% of people say yes occasionally. So yes all the time is not the top response, which makes sense. This is kind of a marketing activity, so it might be more uncomfortable for indie hackers. And it also requires, putting yourself out there, being a little vulnerable, and you might not get a positive response at first. So you might kind of cut down on your posting, even though you intended to do it all the time. You end up, just doing it occasionally, right? But the most fascinating one to me was the no, but I want to. Almost 25% of the market is people who either used to do it and don't do it anymore, or they really want to. And I would imagine there's a little overlap there. So I'd say it's at least 25% of the market really wants to build in public but isn't. And I think there's a similar thing going on with the red part of the pie chart here, where they say yes occasionally. I would imagine that they want to do it more, but something's stopping them. So I do think there is a market again here where, maybe upwards of 70 or 75% of the market really needs a reason and a goal and a push to build in public more. And I think if someone did some research into why people aren't building in public more, they could really have a market on their hands. And I know there are already some people, some really cool people doing that. So yeah, but I think this is really interesting. The next one is, have you ever launched on Product Hunt or Reddit? Again, 33% no, but I want to. And these are self-identified indie hackers and product makers. They're developers and they've probably built something, right? So I would think that they would at least have posted something at least once just to see how it went. And I think it'd be really interesting to see, to interview those people and say, hey, why didn't you actually end up posting? Okay, the next one, this one isn't like super surprising, but how much React outpaced everyone else was a little surprising. Next.js, I was not expecting to be so popular. They're, I guess, doing incredibly well. Vercel is probably doing very, very well in terms of market share. And Rails, I wasn't expecting. I think it was 4 votes for Rails and 1 vote for Rails slash Stimulus Reflex. I wasn't expecting Rails to be so high, but actually, most of the startups that I've worked at professionally have been based on the Rails stack. So I do think that it is probably still incredibly fast to build with Rails compared with anything else. Even if you're doing the Jamstack thing, with React and Next.js, Rails I think can still be fairly competitive. And I think the only thing really holding it back is that it's not all JavaScript, right? I mean, with React and Next.js, you write all one language, and with Rails, you have to learn 2 languages. So I think that might be part of what's holding it back, but I do think that Rails is still an incredibly good option right now. Firebase got a lot of votes. Tailwind did not get a lot of votes, which was surprising to me, but the examples of the stack that I gave were focused on the back end, so I think that's the only reason why Tailwind didn't get more votes, is because it's front end focused. I mean, it's the front end of the front end, right? And these are, the back end of the front end and the actual back end. Remix got a vote, Inertia, JS, these are kind of new up and coming technologies. Elixir got a vote. I'm excited about that. Alpine is a framework that's a little similar to Remake, and I think the person working on that is doing a lot of good, Caleb Porzio. Okay, so the next couple questions are actually super, super interesting to me, especially this first one. So what's the biggest mistake a founder can make when launching? So the first interesting thing about this is I only had 4 answers to this, and then I had an other option. And a lot of people chose that other option because they submitted custom responses. But 53% said waiting too long to launch. So that was super interesting to me because it goes back for me to the building in public and the marketing. I think there's a severe disconnect for most indie hackers when it comes to building something and it comes to putting it out there. I think the putting things out there feels very vulnerable, and it's not something that a lot of people want to do, which makes sense because I'm an introvert personally, and putting myself out there in social situations can be pretty daunting. There's a lot of vulnerability there. I've gotten embarrassed in the past. I've been looked down on in the past, and so it can feel really, really threatening to put yourself out there. And I wonder if other indie hackers have had the same experience in real life or online, where they've put something out there before and it hasn't gotten the best response, and now, they, wait too long to launch, right? The next one was not building an audience before launching, and then the one after that was not having beta users before launching. So those are really interesting as well, and I think that adds up to more than 75% of the market. So I think just with those answers, I guess what is the answer that wasn't given, having an imperfect product at launch. So I think it's interesting that this myth has been dispelled very thoroughly in the indie hacker market. Um, but I think, yeah, waiting too long to launch, that's really interesting to me. I wonder why that happens. It's happened to me a lot. I've waited 2 years, sometimes 3 years before launching something. A lot of startups that I've joined, professional funded startups, have waited way too long to launch. Um, I think there is something there about like wanting to build the perfect product. Um, but I also think a huge part of it is knowing how much work a launch actually is and not being willing to like switch into that mode before you've like, fixed that bug or added that feature or, got this vision, just right or right enough that people are going to get it. They're going to understand it, right? So I think there is, a sense of vulnerability, but there is also a sense of this is going to be a lot of work to switch from build mode into marketing mode and launch mode and actually do a good launch, right? I mean, you have to plan the launch, you have to write the content, you have to make, media for it. You have to ideally, reach out to the press, maybe test the market, get testimonials, from early users. It's a lot of work, and I'm not even saying half of it, right? So I think that is probably part of it as well. But yeah, I need to do more research into that because it's definitely something that I'm interested in right now. Um, and I'm actually researching right now how not wanting to launch is related to like social situations and like not wanting to approach people and talk to them at parties or being nervous about making a new friend or even like going on a date, right? What is stopping people? Um, and the best theory I have so far is that people think that they can't be themselves, right? And this is in social situations as well. We often think that, okay, you can mostly be yourself, but you just can't do this and you can't do that, and you shouldn't say this and you shouldn't say that. And it just gets us way too much in our head, and we can't just like act how we naturally would in the flow of the moment. And a lot of that's based on past experience, right? Where we got teased or, maybe slightly ostracized or made fun of. And maybe even just in a very minor way, right? But that comes back to us in our head as, okay, well, I can't do this, I can't say that, I can't, and so you can't put yourself out there because you're trying to keep track of everything that you need to do. And I think it's the same for a product where you keep thinking, well, this isn't good enough, like it just needs this one more thing. It just needs this one other thing, and then it'll be good enough. Then it'll be perfect. Then it will be able to compete with the big products, from Google or Facebook or, that other product that I saw in Product Hunt last week that was so smooth and clean and polished, right? And they had this, amazing feature. We need a feature like that, right? And I think it's all these little rules in our heads about what a good product is and what isn't. And so we can't just put ourselves out there naturally as we are. And I actually see this a lot on Twitter. I see the people who are comfortable putting themselves out there, even if they're not super product builders, even if they're not coders, they see a lot more success because they're building with no code or, they're building, spreadsheets or they're building things on top of Notion. And they're doing really well because they're comfortable at least just putting themselves out there and seeing what people think and just kind of testing the waters. So I don't know. It's super, super interesting part to me because I want to be able to launch a new product in about a week. That's my goal with pretty much everything I'm doing right now is creating that framework for being able to launch within a week. So this is kind of a pretty interesting place for me. Um, the other cool thing is that so many people responded with custom responses here. And I think I missed an answer here because a lot of people said not building something other people want, um, building without validation, not knowing the audience, not building something people want. So and not asking potential users what the problem is. So I think other than these answers, there's this lack of connection that is felt by indie hackers to their audience, and realizing that, like, okay, you can't just sit down and build. You can't just have a dream and build it. Even if that's really fun and that's what you really want to do, is just sit down and build and imagine, a world where this new type of product exists. You also have to have an audience that believes in that and needs that and wants that, and you're solving a real need. There's a real validation that the market you're building into needs what you're building, right? And I think I didn't have that here, which is probably like my own personal bias. But I think the fact that so many people wrote that in is so important, because I think if I would have had that as an answer, I would imagine it's probably at least 25%, right? And I think, yeah, I probably could have phrased it as like building without validation, or not building something people want, right? I think my instinct, and I would have to do this survey over in order to confirm, but my instinct is that that would be at least 25%, and that people that had voted for the other things would have switched into that instead. So that's really, really interesting. Because for me, it really gets under my skin that I have to build something that people want. It gets to this problem that I feel like indie hackers have in general when they're putting something out there. Again, it's that voice in the back of your head that says, "Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't say this, you can't say that. You have to be this way, you have to be that way," right? And to me, this building something people want phrase, or yeah, it feels like an order to me. It feels like an imperative, right? Um, and it's not that I don't want to build something people want. It's that I want to build something that I think people want, and that I want to do it my way, right? And I think a lot of people have this. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say a lot of people have this problem, where they feel like, okay, well, if they just listened to other people and did what other people wanted from them, they could get along and they could start a business, right, that was profitable. But they don't want to go that way. They want to do something different. They want to do something new. They want to do something unexpected that people really need, but they don't know that they need, right? Or something along those lines, right? And I definitely have that, that like very, very deep, strong need to do something new that people haven't seen before, that will be like interesting and powerful and cool. And I think that that's a problem, because I think that there is, when you have a connection to your audience, um, and you understand what they need and what they want, I do think that there is like a push and pull there, that is natural and rewarding, right? I mean, it's the same thing if you go up to a group of people at a party and you start talking, you kind of lose yourself, right? I mean, you're not 100% yourself and only saying things that are super interesting to you, and you're not 100% relying on the cues from other people to do what they want you to do, but you're kind of in a in between mode, right, where you're acting like yourself, but you're also participating in the flow of conversation and activity. um, and I think that that's a leap. I think that that's a jump to get there, right? um, And I think that anything that holds you back from doing that, from participating in the conversation or in the market, is going to be bad for your business. So I think just like those doubts about, oh, I have to change myself and I have to make this perfect and pretty and, something that resonates with people, and all of those doubts that come up in the back of your mind, those aren't going to help you kind of just dive into the conversation. But then, in a similar way, the resistance to building something people want and like wanting to do something new and different and be unique, that's also going to hold you back from fully participating, right? And that's come up for me in ordinary social situations where I think I have to say something different or be different, and it's fine, right? I mean, it works some of the time, and sometimes people will really get it, and they'll think I'm being funny, or they'll join in on what I'm doing, and they'll participate in that. But a lot of the time it's kind of a little bit antisocial, and it's not fully respecting what's out there already, and that people do have needs, and people have real lives where they're they're trying to accomplish something, and ignoring all of that and just building with whatever's in your head is probably not the right approach. Okay, so I've gone through that a lot because this is something that I obviously personally struggle with, and it's probably why I didn't have that answer on the survey of building something people want. So that's going to be interesting for me to work through over the next few months or years. Okay, but anyways, let's finish this off. This kind of gets more into remake and remakes marketing, so you can kind of stop watching now if you don't want to hear that much about remake. But I'll just go through this quickly. So I have a way that you can create and launch a fully functional and beautiful product with only HTML and CSS, including a backend, user accounts, and hosting. What would be your initial response? So a lot of people, it's funny that I only put negative responses here. I didn't put even one response of like, that sounds amazing, let me buy. I should have probably put one positive response, but it's evenly split between it sounds cool, but it won't be flexible enough, powerful or flexible enough, and I already have a framework/stack that I'm comfortable with, which is exactly what I was fearing when it comes to this market. And it gives me an idea for how to pursue the next steps with remake. So I think what I'm going to do is try to connect these two things. So it sounds cool, but it won't be powerful or flexible enough, and I already have a framework and stack. I'm going to try to connect those two things back to these problems of putting yourself out there. And we can see this and I'll show you how I'm going to do that, or how I'm kind of thinking about doing that right now. But let's go to the last answer first, because this has to do with it as well. So which product headline would make you want to sign up for more? Really interesting how many custom responses there were here as well. But the top ones were getting your first customer should take 100 lines of code, not 10,000, and turn your design into a working app in an afternoon in second place, and then a web app framework that accelerates your launch. So this accelerating your launch and getting a working product in as few lines of code as possible, I think can really connect back to the marketing. And let me tell you how I'm thinking about doing that. So what I think I want, the argument I think I want to make is that you're a developer, you can build anything you can imagine, and that's actually too much power, because you're going to end up getting lost in making something really, really, really good. And so that's gonna hurt you in the long run. Because what you really need is to just get out there, right? Um, if you want to write something on the internet and publish it, you don't build your own blog first, right? I mean, I know a lot of developers do, but then they only end up posting one post, right? What you really want to do if you want to publish more online and put yourself out there and test your message is you want to put something out there as quickly as possible. You want to sign up for a WordPress or a Ghost or a blogger, right? And just put the first post out there. See how it does. The design isn't going to matter that much, right? The design of your website, it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it's good enough and it has, some good content, people are going to read. And then you can experiment and you can keep putting stuff out there. And then I already have a framework/stack I'm comfortable with. The argument against this is similar, but it's just going to say that, like, okay, you have a full stack framework and you're focused on the full stack. And that is three pieces, right? You're focused on the back end with the schemas and the database and the API endpoints and the validation and security and hosting and DevOps, right? It's a lot on the back end, right? And then I don't know. I mean, maybe DevOps is even separate, right? But then there's the middle end, right, where you have how the back end connects to the front end and how you're going to be loading in data and where you're going to put that data and how the data is going to flow through your app and how you're going to validate that data and then how you're going to send it back up and how you're going to communicate back and forth, right? And then there's the front end of the front end, which is the design and the components and how things are going to fit together and Flexbox and grid and all these different layout issues and cross-browser testing. So you have three things that you have to worry about, and you have to worry about every single piece of those things. And that's going to fill up your entire head, right? And so you're not going to have enough room for marketing and for putting yourself out there. And so, I don't know, it just goes back to the blog, right? If you want to blog regularly, don't build your own blog every time you want to post a blog post. Just post a blog post on a platform that exists. And what Remake is going to let you do is it's going to let you create a very lightweight test product that will limit you purposefully and how much you can do and how much your audience is going to be able to do when they're using it in order to force you to put yourself out there, right? So it's going to force you to build in public. It's going to force you to launch, right? It's going to force you. I mean, one of the biggest issues is waiting too long to launch. Why do you think that happens? It's because of these two things. It's because you have a stack that's too powerful and too flexible so you can do anything. And so that just keeps going on ad infinitum, right? And you keep building anything and everything under the sun. And then you already have a framework stack that you're comfortable with. And this framework and stack takes up 99% of your headspace. And so you don't have the mental and emotional fortitude and energy to actually launch. And so we're going to make a really, I hesitate to call it dumb, but we're going to make a really uncomplicated, web app framework that lets you turn 100 lines of code into a product so that you are forced to put it out there and to see how it does. And you're not going to make that mistake, that number one mistake of waiting too long to launch. And you are going to be able to see if you've built something that people actually want, right? And there's a lot of ways of doing market validation, right? You can do user testing and user interviews, and you can run surveys, right? But the best possible way of doing market validation is to actually just put something out there and see what the market thinks, period, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you're going to have to do no matter what approach you take. And if you have a really, really quick way of building something and seeing if it's validated by the market, you're going to have a lot easier of a time in the long run, right? And the added bonus, just to sneak something in a little extra here, the added bonus is that you're going to be doing marketing at the same time because every product launch is exciting, right? People love new launches. They love finding new things. They love, finding something that's unique or new or cool, right? And telling their friends about it, or just having an upper hand on the market because they're the first person to discover this new thing, right? So launches are inherently exciting. So even if you don't have a lot of followers, right, or you don't post on social media a lot, doing a launch is going to be exciting to people. And if you don't have to wait 2 years because you're building with a powerful, flexible stack, in order to launch, and you can launch every month, then that's going to be doing your marketing for you. You can do launch-based marketing, right? Uh, so that's the whole pitch of Remake that I'm thinking about, right? And that would be like the whole landing page, leading with something along the lines of getting your first customer should take 100 lines of code, not 10,000, and then connecting that into your stack is too powerful and flexible, um, and it's taking up 99% of your headspace to the rest of this. So I don't know if that's going to work. I'm still brainstorming, obviously, but I really wanted to share these results with people and just have you guys get some insight into the market as well. I do think if anyone wants to build any kind of marketing guide for indie hackers or developers in general, you're going to have a ready market for you. um, but yeah, in the meantime, if anyone wants my advice on a marketing book, it's called Marketing Made Simple. Um, by a guy named Donald something. But anyways, Marketing Made Simple. It's one of the best books on marketing I've read. So anyways, I will talk to you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry this video is so long. Goodbye.